All right, this is the 11:30 UK time, 10:30 GMT edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo editions. We've launched in the last 24 hours an international campaign, a non-profit initiative that is aimed at raising international awareness of the United Nations failing to implement the 1951 Refugee Convention. And after searching for the latest documentary evidence of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees website, we find that the last time they actually had an update was done in December 2010. So that was 7 months after, in the UK, the Conservatives took over the UK government in May 2010. And it has been 13 years. Whatever the problems, the Conservatives have remained in post as the UK government in the United Kingdom. And the evidence is that the United Kingdom, of all the Western European countries, including the regime fronted by the neo-fascist prime minister in Italy, the UK has been the fiercest denier. The UK state has been the fiercest denier of its obligations as a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention. This is fact. So what we have done, we have launched this because we have found that no organization exists, no campaign has existed to hold to account signatory states in relation to their ratification and signing of the 1951 Refugee Convention, including the update, which is a technical update, which is not a detailed update at all. It's a technical update dated in 1967. So what we have done, we have looked at the United Nations HCR website, and we shall read this for the record on this program. The 1951 Refugee Convention. Now, there is this piece published by Amnesty International, amnesty.org.uk, which has got the heading Refugee Convention, a convention for the 21st century. And the contents read, human rights abuses are happening right now. With your help, we can work to end injustice. Join the fight for human rights, learn about current issues, and add your voice. Now, that is the human rights, the Refugee Convention being used as a propaganda item for the UK, Amnesty International. Now, there is an organization called EUrescue.org, right? EU.rescue.org. 1951 Refugee Convention. Who holds the most refugees is the question. So let's make a check. quick check and we shall see. We shall go back to the UNHCR. 70 years after the 1951 Refugee Convention, who hosts the most refugees? That is the question. Now, notice the figure. It's not 70 years, for fuck's sake. 51, it is 72 years. So this is dated 29th of July 2021, and they haven't updated the fucking post, which is why we have decided to launch our own international non-profit educational and information campaign with effect from today, Monday, the 3rd of April 2023. One of the things we shall be doing will be to put the necessary constitutional, ethical, and evidential pressure on the corrupt bureaucracy at the United Nations. We condemn the member states reappointing this really corrupt individual as the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, whom we call gutless. Guterres is completely useless. With the United Kingdom government playing the leading fascistic role in harassing the most vulnerable people trying to seek and find refuge and asylum, the United Nations has been completely, absolutely fucking silent, as has the stupid bureaucracy, corrupt bureaucracy of the UNHCR. So we aim to fill those serious gaps and defects, and we want to make the convention, the Refugee Convention, a most overdue talking point, so that they can actually lead to widespread comprehensive actions that have been overdue to be taken in the so-called destination countries, as well as on the international scale, that is international, meaning between states, among states, the media, the parliaments, and all the rest of it. It's a huge task. But it's not something we have chosen. It is something that has been assumed to have been existing, but it doesn't exist. So we are launching this today, and we hopefully will succeed in saving lives and helping people avoid the deadly experiences that so many have been, if you like, condemned to experience and lose their lives. The latest one, of course, that had the largest number of casualties happened off the Italian coast. And one of the people that, I mean, ironic, isn't it? But it is absolutely criminal. One of the people who died, well, I think that all the circumstances add to the conclusion that she was murdered, because she is not just the only one. All the people that have been murdered in the drowning have been murdered by member states. Now, people who don't live in the United Kingdom but are interested in political affairs in the UK, the media, must be aware, some of them at least, must be aware of the publication, the fortnightly, the 2-weekly publication that is wrongly called satirical. It hardly has any satire, called Private Eye. Now, Private Eye claims to be the UK's largest circulated magazine, etc. And the claim is based on the actual emptiness in the UK political journalism market, if you like. And the Private Eye has got a number of pages or columns right from the beginning when it started in the 1960s. And one of the ones is called the Street of Shame. That street is derived from the name Fleet Street. Fleet Street is London EC4, used to be the place, the street where the largest number of UK British newspapers were based in. Because of that location, the collective name for the newspapers, British newspapers, became Fleet Street. Now, let's check on the Fleet Street name and then we shall go back to Private Eye. We call it Private Lie. So we have been broadcasting for just under 12 minutes now on these Baby Angel Geronimo editions of the Khoodeelaar television channel. And I'm talking about the launch by the Khoodeelaar campaign of the international campaign in the last 24 hours, which I shall name Bring the United Nations Organization to Life to Save Lives. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. Bring the UNO to life to save lives. And this is, of course, a reference to the people being murdered on the seas, mainly of the European countries and European states' coastal lines. Now let's go and check what it says about the name Fleet Street. I'm checking the Fleet Street origin of the name, and I shall hopefully be able to locate this origin, the origin of the name. Fleet Street is a major street, mostly in the city of London. It runs west to east from Temple Bar at the boundary with the city of Westminster to Ludgate. Let's check the whole entry. It runs west to east from Temple Bar at the boundary with the city of Westminster to Ludgate Circus, at the site of the London Wall and the River Fleet, from which the street was named. So, about printing and journalism, it says, publishing started in Fleet Street around 1500 when William Caxton's apprentice, Wynkyn Ward, set up a printing shop near Shoe Lane, while at around the same time, Richard Pinson set up as publisher and printer next to St. Dunstan's Church. More printers and publishers followed. mainly supplying the legal trade in the 4 inch of court around the area, but also publishing books and plays. In March 1702, the first issue of London's first daily newspaper, the Daily Courant, well, it must be Daily Current in the current form, was published in Fleet Street. It was followed by the Morning Chronicle. The publisher John Murray was founded at number 32 Fleet Street in 1762 and remained there until 1812 when it moved to Albemarle Street, that is W1. The popularity of newspapers was restricted due to various taxes during the early 19th century, particularly paper duty. Peel's Coffee House at number 177 to 178 Fleet Street became popular and was the main committee room for the Society for repealing the paper duty, starting in 1858. The society was successful and the duty was abolished in 1861. Along with the repeal of the newspaper tax in 1855, this led to a dramatic expansion of newspaper production in Fleet Street. The penny press, newspaper costing 1 penny, became popular during the 1880s. And the initial number of titles had consolidated into a few nationally important ones. I'm checking some technical issues. Okay, so by the 20th century, Fleet Street and the area surrounding it were dominated by the national press. By that, I mean UK national press or UK state centric or centered press and related industries. The Daily Express relocated to number 121 to 128 Fleet Street in 1931 into a building designed by Sir Owen Williams. It was the first curtain wall building in London. It has survived the departure of the newspaper in 1989 and was restored in 2001. Daily Telegraph was based at number 135 to 142. These premises are both grade 2 listed. In the 1930s, number 67 housed 25 separate publications. By this time, the majority of British households bought a daily paper produced from Fleet Street. In 1986, News International owner Rupert Murdoch caused controversy when he moved publication of The Times and The Sun away from Fleet Street to new premises in Wapping, East London. Now, this is a wrong statement in the wiki entry because The Times wasn't in Fleet Street at that time. The Times was actually in the Gray's Inn Road. But we shall leave that item for amendment later. New premise in Wapping, East London, Murdoch believed it was impossible to produce a newspaper profitably on Fleet Street. And the power of the print unions, the National Graphical Association and the Society of Graphical and Allied Trades, that is NGA and SOGAT, they were too strong, an opinion endorsed by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, but I know that these two trade unions, print unions, were corrupt, absolutely corrupt, and they are still corrupt. It doesn't matter what political party the person belongs to or whether they belong to any political party giving this opinion. I'm giving this opinion empirically because of my experience with these two unions. All Fleet Street print staff were sacked and new staff from the electrical, electronic, telecommunications, and plumbing union were brought in to operate the presses at Wapping using modern computer operated technology, rendering the power of the old unions obsolete. The resulting Wapping dispute featured violent protests at Fleet Street and Wapping that lasted over a year, but ultimately other publishers followed suit and moved out of Fleet Street towards Canary Wharf or Sadiq. Reuters was the last major news outlet to leave Fleet Street. In 2005, in the same year, the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Telegraph announced they were returning to the centre of London from Canary Wharf to new premises in Victoria in 2006. Some publishers have remained on Fleet Street. The London office of the DC Thomson and Company, creator of the Beano, is at number 185. The Secretariat of the Commonwealth Broadcasting Association is at number 17. Now, that is a fascinating joke. Commonwealth Broadcasting Association. Fuck them. There is absolutely no fucking life to that stupid outlet, which is a glorified renaming of empire. As is Wentworth Publishing, an independent publisher of newsletters and courses. The Associated Press has an office in Fleet Street, as did the Jewish Chronicle until 2013, when it moved to Golders Green. The British Association of Journalists is based at number 89, while Metro International are at number 85. And so on, it goes on. Anyway, the main point about Fleet Street is that Private Eye calls the Street of Shame. The column is called Street of Shame because it claims, Private Eye claims to be taking a rigorously diagnostic, and almost ethical, critical look at the behavior of Fleet Street, the newspapers, wherever they are officially cited or published from. So let's look at the entry in this that describes Street of Shame. The Private Eye's Street of Shame is the one that looks at the behavior of the papers inside. That is the claim, but it doesn't really. Because the Street of Shame retails kind of little gossips that it obtains from people who are working on these titles. It doesn't really investigate and doesn't examine the ethics or the morality or the criminality that is perpetrated by the Fleet Street. So when they say they're looking at the Street of Shame and its contents, they are misleading on a secondary kind of level. I'm looking for the current issue, print issue of Private Lie, so that I can illustrate just what I'm. this is very important to understand why we launched and we have launched the campaign in the last 24 hours to focus attention in a way that should have been done years ago on the behavior, the fascistic behavior, the illegal behavior, unconstitutional behavior on the part of the United Kingdom state in relation to the obligations that the United Kingdom owes and has had to practice, to implement, to apply the terms and the provisions and the purpose and the provide the safeguards to the people affected by the Refugee Convention. Now, the reason I am talking about private lie is that private lie has not and does not, as a matter of practice, recognize the international framework, despite the fact that it claims that it does. It doesn't. So, therefore, there is no reference and there is no investigation, there is no real noticeable investigation by the private lie into the British newspaper, that is the Fleet Street. And despite the fact that Fleet Street includes all the titles that are so-called UK national, the main popular fascistic publications are represented by the Daily Mail, which is the kind of personification of evil and racism and hatred, closely followed by Rupert Murdoch's Scum. We call it Scum because of its contents. So the result has been that for the 13 years since the UNHCO, the United Nations High Commissioner's Office, that is supposed to be responsible for the implementation of the Refugee Convention of 1951, that is the substantive date. Despite the fact that the UK has been a member and signatory and ratifier of the UN Refugee Convention of 1951, the newspapers, Fleet Street, don't recognize in their coverage, nor does indeed the UK House of Commons, which is the main part of the parliament, because that is the so-called elected part, nor does successive frontiers of the United Kingdom government, fronted by the corrupt David Cameron, the crook, then followed by Theresa May, then followed by Boris Johnson, then followed by Liz Truss, and currently being followed by Rishi, the one who is sinking, according to our evidential observation, Sunak. Rishi, the sunk Sunak. Now, in the past 5 years, especially, past 5 years, because of the racist hatred generated around the Brexit referendum of June 2016, the United Kingdom political kind of establishment, aided and abetted by Fleet Street, has perpetrated serious criminal incitement of hatred against innocent groups of people, who are actually people from Africa and Asia, not as much as the people in the Eastern European part of Europe, that were the targets of being denied the benefit of the 1951 Refugee Convention. So let's go back to the Refugee Convention and read a bit, not all of it, because most of the item that is on the website of the UNHCO was only updated 13 years ago. I broadcast in January 1992 on the Channel 4 news hour on a slot called the slot, in January 1992. This is about the Refugee Convention. It was about role, the role that the United Kingdom had to play and owed. Now, this is the UNHCR, is described as the UN Refugee Agency, not HCO, but United Nations HCR. And that's the introduction to the 1951 Refugee Convention that I read earlier in the last 24 hours. And I'm going to read this for the record on this particular edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel. The 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 protocol are the key legal documents that form the basis of our work, that is UN Refugee Agency. With 149 state parties to either or both, they define the term refugee and outlines, this is the outline, that is 51 Refugee Convention, outlines the rights of refugees as well as the legal obligations of states to protect refugees. The core principle is on non-refoulement, which asserts that a refugee should not be returned to a country where they face serious threats to their life or freedom. This is now considered a rule of customary international law. UNHCR serves as the guardian of the 1951 Convention and its 1967 protocol. According to the legislation, states are expected to cooperate with us in ensuring that the rights of refugees are respected and protected. Now, this is the maximum that I'll read, because I'm absolutely disgusted by the timidity and the stupidity and the falsification of the context by this outset, this website operated in the name of the UK UN Refugee Agency. Because for the 13 years since the UK state has been in the grip of the Conservatives have operated on a daily basis, non-stop program of vilification of refugees, of asylum seekers. And that has been for a longer period than the Nazis in Germany carried out the campaign before the Holocaust against the targets of their Holocaust, demonized the most vulnerable people, the weakest people in society. And yet there is no mention in this stupid UN refugee agency, UK. And what has happened in the daily vituperative, hateful utterances by the likes of the congenital liar Boris Johnson and his imitator, the mental slave Priti Patel, and the mental slave now in place of Priti Patel, Suella Fernandez, who has obtained for herself a name by organizing a marriage with a man whose name is Braverman, and which name she abuses. She is of Indian origin from Goa, but she says that her husband, who she says is a Jewish, is offended by people who make the slightest remark that she and her husband interpret as being anti-Semitic. Now, obviously, Suella Braverman is an evil personification. There is no suggestion in anything she has spewed that the refugees that she is targeting, asylum seekers that she is targeting, are human at all. So there is this outrageous, racist, disgusting racist discrimination, in addition to the discrimination based on the denial of the refugees' rights and needs. And this UNHCR UK is run by racist morons. The racist liars are in denial about the anti-refugee campaign by the conservatives in the United Kingdom. So these criminals who operate this UNHCR website branded UK are featuring things to do with Afghanistan, to do with other parts of the world, but not acknowledging, let alone condemning, let alone opposing the fascistic behavior of the UK or of France or of Italy. Now, one of the victims of the murder by drowning of the Italian coast in February 2023 was, of course, described as Pakistani national hockey champion. A Pakistani national champion hockey player drowned. And what happened? The aftermath, after it became known that she was one of the victims of the murder by drowning, all kinds of sympathetic kind of statements began to be published in Pakistan. Now, the question that I put before launching this particular campaign that I'm talking about today, the question that I put to Pakistan's campaigner for opposition, Imran Khan, and his Tehreek-e-Insaf, is this: what do they have to say about this woman who was a victim of the murder because she tried to cross from Turkey to Europe, Italy in this case? What was the reason for her leaving Pakistan? And she left Pakistan where she left her disabled child. And the disabled child was cited as the so-called reason for her former husband, who divorced this woman. And this criminal cited this disability of this child as the reason for his divorcing this hockey champion. And the hockey champion, according to reports that I have seen, obviously I've seen only a sample from Pakistan, saw no help coming. So she sought whatever she thought would be avenues where she could raise enough income, etc., and look after her disabled child and live herself in better economic conditions than she was able to do in Pakistan on her own. Now, Imran Khan has been speaking at rallies until his kind of recent or later attempt on his life. And one of the main things that Imran Khan has been emphasizing has been the Hakiki Azadi, the true meaning of freedom of Pakistan. Now, what he refers to as Hakiki Azadi is a reference to 1947, August 1947, 14th of August 1947, when kind of officially the state of Pakistan came into being, a day before the Republic of India came into being, resulting from the same decision by the British imperialists to leave the subcontinent. And the British state itself remains guilty of playing a poisonously dishonest and discriminatory role, the result of which has been for 76 years uncertainty, lack of peace in vast parts of the subcontinent, especially the borders between India and Pakistan concerning Kashmir. And the United Nations has persistently failed to implement the decisions, the resolutions that have been passed over Kashmir. A lot of people from Kashmir feel, mainly Muslims, a lot of people from Kashmir feel uncertain, insecure. So they are among the people that are constantly on the lookout for a way out of Kashmir, out of India. And they are the ones that are included among the list of people that would need the protection and the support of the 1951 Refugee Convention. So that actually directly goes to the role played by Mountbatten, who was the late British Queen's uncle. Mountbatten was so close to the Indian side of the subcontinent that he pretended he was not noticing his wife Edwina was sleeping with Jawaharlal Nehru. That was a kind of behavior that has later been revealed as the behavior of Winston Churchill, who told his wife to sleep with rich Americans in order to get information from them. So Mountbatten and Winston Churchill both played de facto role as pimps. So there is no morality. There is no ethics whatsoever. And what happened was that because of the lack of morality on the part of these people, a permanent crisis causing people to seek refuges was instilled in the whole arrangement in 1947. So when Imran Khan says Hakiki Azadi, he automatically becomes responsible to answer questions about what he, as the leader of the Tehreek-e-Insaf, has done and is intending to do about the issues that individuals like the Pakistan national hockey champion individuals face before they take the deadly journey and risk on the way to mainly destinations in the West. What has he been doing? I have not seen anything, any post or any comment reported by the Pakistan outlets attributing any comment to Imran Khan about this hockey player. Now, this is significant. Quite apart from being the political leader, Imran Khan is, of course, himself the national kind of hero in sporting terms, which is part of his profile and his credibility. How is it that a national hero, a woman, no less, was allowed to perish? And this is what I meant in January 1992 when I wrote and presented the program Slot. And I aimed my program at then UK Prime Minister John Major. On Channel 4 program, I said that the refugees, asylum seekers, whatever the words, were going to feel so insecure in their countries of origin that unless the Western countries took serious steps to solve the main problems that existed in the countries of origins in Africa and Asia, then an overwhelming number of people would want to seek refuges in the West, Western Europe, and in the West. Now, that was 31 years ago. And in the 31 years, no newspaper in Fleet Street, not a single issue of the overstated British magazine Private Lie, no member of parliament in the United Kingdom House of Commons, no member of the government of any color in the UK, because the 1992 broadcast was followed in 1997 by the May 1997 election in the UK, which was, quote, won by Tony Blair. Now, what did Tony Bilayar do about my broadcast? Of course, not only did he ignore what I said, but he made things worse for the people of the subcontinent. This Afghan reporter that the private lie is referring to in the current issue, this Afghan woman who reporter on the Pushtu language reporter on a broadcast on a radio program. Let me just check if I can find her entry. She's an Afghan woman, and she perished, and it's an absolute. That was the spark. That is the reason why I decided to launch this campaign in the last 24 hours after reading about her. Her name is given in this piece by the website thediplomat.com, dated the 10th of March, as the journalist Torpikai Amarkel. The Torpikai Amarkel, I'm only reading how it is spelled. I don't know the name. I don't know the language at all. So my pronunciation may be slightly off the normal way that these words are pronounced, but I'm doing this for the record. Journalist Torpikai Amarkel was among dozens of asylum seekers who died when their boat capsized near Italy. And it says, and it's written by somebody called Philip Smaka. Journalist Topikai Amarkel was among the dozens of asylum seekers who died when their boat capsized near Italy. Her story encapsulates how the world has failed the Afghan people. Well, we shall come to that. Now, looking at her picture that is run with this item, you would not imagine. You would not imagine that she would drown one day in the way that she did die. Okay, let's. The deaths added to a confounding story of betrayal, which I find hard to reckon with after having spent nearly 2 decades associated with Afghanistan as a journalist and public affairs employee of the US government and United Nations. Only this time, the death was that of a friend and colleague. I had worked closely with Torpekai on stories about Afghan women journalists and all those crucial human rights issues that bothered the conscience of anyone who knew the tragedy that lay beneath the surface of a tortured land. Now, this is all kind of predictable from somebody who knows or knew Amarkel or Torpika. What this writer is not writing about is how did Afghanistan become so tortured? Why have the West, going back to the time of the Greeks, why have they been so intent on physically mounting regular murderous attacks on Afghanistan? I mean, who asked for the torture? They have not left Afghanistan alone. Now, when in 2021 this so called Afghan exit of the Americans took place, followed by the British state serving as the enslaved partners to the American machine, the people that were being mentioned in the main news bulletins really were white people, American white people, British white people, not Afghans. So the Refugee Convention is being ignored, and the actual reason why people want to seek refuge is being denied. So it's not an accidental thing, it is a cultural thing. And in the case of Afghanistan, it's a crusader thing. Anyone who wants to know about crusade and crusaders thing can look up and they can find the details. Essentially, it is the Christian empires mounting attacks on the Muslims that were emerging in the Middle East, in the Arabic speaking world, and Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan, and other places are very near where Islam began. So the attacks on the Muslims, emerging Muslims, not because of what they were doing, but because they were different faith, the attacks began almost immediately after the Muslims became established of some sort as societies. And what Afghanistan has been tortured for is because it is a Muslim country. If you look at the geography, Afghanistan is next to Kashmir, next to Pakistan, of course. And what has happened in the decades since the Bush and Blair alliance of murderers attacked Afghanistan, but the most people who left their home, had to leave their homes, sought refuges in Pakistan. So the Pakistan next door has been demographically the biggest recipient of the people seeking asylum and refuges. Neither Private Lie, nor Fleet Street, nor even The Guardian, which is now owning up to its slavery, owning ancestors and founders, nor indeed the UK Parliament, is talking about the real burden, economic burden, social burden that has been borne by Pakistan, not by India. Not by India by a long measure of difference. So, what we are going to do in the campaign that we have launched and introducing in this broadcast about the 1951 Refugee Convention is to draw attention to all these facts and evidence on a daily basis. Now, moving on to the dysfunctional state of the United Kingdom, state apparatus, we can take a look at the local councils, which is what private law actually has a regular feature on, called rotten boroughs. And the rotten boroughs, self-evident expression, rotten boroughs actually are about, suppose, the corrupt, dysfunctional, dishonestly run local councils. Let's say mainly in England, but not exclusively only in England, but mainly in England because of the numerical kind of majority being in England. The local councils currently in the news include, of course, Croydon. Currently in the news is Croydon and Tyneside, I think South Tyneside. But Croydon is the one council, it's just outside of Greater London, but say in South London. Croydon is the one council that has been in political so-called control of the Labour Party, has been so thoroughly, openly corrupt that if the corruption of Croydon Council were being done by a, let's say, business like Sainsbury's branch or a bank branch anywhere, it would have been not only shut immediately, but most of the perpetrating executives would have been arrested and processed for prosecution, despite the fact that there is huge issues about the competence and the integrity of the London Metropolitan Police, for example. Croydon Council has had literally hundreds of millions of pounds stolen, robbed, not stolen because theft is secret, but robbery is open, isn't it? Robbed by elected councillors, and in the case of this individual called Negrini, chief executive, appointed by the crooked elected councillors. Croydon Council has been a site, a criminal site, a crime scene, persisting, festering for years, and no action has been taken to prosecute them. Now remember what the council's line is in the newspapers on Sunday. What is there is an item in the Sunday Times, or let's say Times newspapers, attributing the stated policy to Michael Gove, who is the cabinet minister allegedly for communities. And he is in effect staging what Margaret Thatcher had done, staging a withdrawal, a reversal of what Thatcher did. Now this is important because this is about housing and this is about right to buy. The right to buy was a robbery of the concept of social housing perpetrated by Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. Now, 1980, this is now nearly 40 years since Thatcher inflicted that robbery. And what happened in the 40 years or so, or in the decades since Thatcher's robbery of social housing, is that the number of people needing housing increased manifold and the number of available properties decreased many times because by converting the social housing into marketable commodities, the number of housing stock was withdrawn from the accessible social sector. So there was a two-sided attack, two tiers of attack, two channels of attacks on the concept of housing. One, the number of increased demands, and the other is the reduction in the available of supply, social housing supply. So it has taken decades before the conservatives have had the pressure to acknowledge the robbery of Margaret Thatcher. Now, when she died, there was a small group of people celebrating the news that Margaret Thatcher had died. And in the streets of London, that particular group reportedly danced and said, "The witch is dead." Now, that was a celebration. I would not repeat the word witch because that is a controversial use of the word that is historically exposed as being aimed at women. But apart from that, if you take away the word witch and say evil, and say the evil Thatcher is dead, then it follows all the evidence and the logic. And the people who were celebrating the news of her demise were celebrating the end of her criminality, her evilness, her evil policies, which is policy included in the right to buy adventure. And she had no regret, nor has any of the other conservatives expressed any regret. Even in his de facto about turn and reversal of Thatcher's right to buy corruption, Michael Gove is refusing to apologize or admit the extent of the corruption and criminality represented by Thatcher's right to buy robbery. So, what we shall be doing will be, of course, talking about all these issues in the next editions. And to reiterate that we are going to mount an international campaign in honor of the victims of the murders on the seas and to secure the implementation of the purposes of protecting them, both via the 1951 Refugee Convention and via other international agreements and instruments. And we shall be doing that, I think, on the evidence as a unique service that has been overdue. And we hope that anyone with any conscience will support us and solidarize with us and pay homage to these victims, innocent victims. So we shall be hopefully be able to broadcast more editions during the rest of the day today, Monday, the 3rd of April 2023. This is 1 hour, 12 minutes. And we're closing this edition at 11:47 GMT, which is 12:47 local time in